Is going on, everyone? Cold Case Project back again. And today, the case we're going to be running over is the disappearance of Angela Hammond, who went missing from Missouri in 1991. We're going to discuss the details. We are going to discuss a couple of eerily similar cases that happened in the pretty close proximity to her disappearance. We are also going to discuss an arrest that was made of two individuals in one of the similar cases and close out, give some final thoughts and whatnot. So, like I said, try to update and post every single day. So, get this, throw me a comment, leave me a request, tell me what's up, throw me a like, throw me a subscribe. I'll try to get back to you as much stuff as I possibly can. So, Angela Hammond was engaged, 20-year-old, lived outside of the Clinton, Missouri area, and she was out one night, and she was going to actually meet up with her fiance, Rob Schaefer. Now, for those of you who for those of you who are a little younger, you may not realize we didn't have cell phones, back in the 1990s. So a lot of times, if we had to make a phone call, we had to change in plans, we would have to stop by a payphone and make a phone call. So she was supposed to go meet up with her fiance, but she changed her mind, was going to go home, take a bath, get some rest, and she decided to stop by this convenience store. Now, the convenience store was closed. From what I understand, all the lights were off in the area, minus a few right by the phone booth. So, at about 11:45 on April the 4th, 1991, Angela stopped, made a phone call outside of the Food Barn store, and as they were talking, she noticed that there was a suspicious man in a dirty pickup truck that kept circling around the phone booth. When he asked what the guy looked like, she described him as a filthy, bearded man. Now, after he circled a couple times, he stopped his truck and he parks real close to the phone booth. He gets out and over. He was wearing overalls and he had a flashlight. Now he's kind of looking around his truck as if he'd lost something, and she let him know that he was getting kind of close to where the phone booth was. She didn't know what she should do. Now, what happens next is where things start to kind of just go in a different direction. Rob hears her scream, and as he hears her scream, the phone gets cut. Now, as soon as Rob hears this, rather than contacting authorities, he decided to jump in the vehicle in his car and try to chase the man down himself. Now, Rob gets in his car, knowing exactly where she was parked, knowing where she was at, and as he's heading towards there, green late 60s to early 70s Ford F-150 pickup sped right by him. And as it sped right by him, he heard Angela scream, "Help." And he heard her screaming. And he kept up for a few blocks. He's chasing behind this pickup. Now, though, one of the things that he said stood out about this pickup, just like this picture you see here, is it had like a lake setting. You could actually see like a fish, like, kind of like hopping out of the water, which kind of definitely, like I said, late 60s model. So we're about, 15 to 20-year-old pickup right now at this time. Actually, no, sorry. It'd be at least about a 20-year-old pickup at this time. Speeding, had some other damage to the vehicle. Now, when he asked him, did you notice anyone, driving the car? What he did notice was a man. Now, from what is suspicious is, what's kind of weird is in this picture, this is the suspect drawing that if you look on just about anything, this is the picture they're going to give you. You hear, bearded, mustache. I don't see a beard or a mustache really. However, they did describe him as having long, dark, kind of stringy hair. He also had a baseball cap on and dirty overalls. Now, like I said, unfortunately, as he was chasing after the vehicle, his transmission blew, his car was gone, and that would be essentially the last time anyone would see Angela alive. Now, there outside of really going after, well, not really going after, but seeing what Rob may have knew about the case. Obviously, being the boyfriend, he's going to be the first person people are going to think, did this really happen? Like, is this suspicious? Um, but they never really came up with anything outside of that. However, one of the interesting facts was this would not be in this Missouri area the first time a young girl by herself was a victim of a crime of opportunity. Now, a couple years earlier, I believe the date on this one would actually be. Let's see. Yeah. Now, Diane Braungart was last seen on March the 11th of 1987. For those of you who remember Ventures, she was an employee of a Venture. For those of you who don't know what Venture is, it was kind of like the pre-Target department store that was around in a lot of cities. She was a clerk there, just finished her shift, and last time anyone ever seen her alive was about 10 p.m. Shift finished, and she was seen walking out to her car. No one ever said if there was a suspicious vehicle or anything, or if screams were heard. There were some individuals that were seen in the area that got questioned, but nothing ever really turned out of that lead. Now, we fast forward to a couple months before Angela's disappearance. We have Cheryl Kenny. Now, Cheryl Kenny was she was a convenience store clerk. She was working on it was February the 27th of 1991 in Nevada, Missouri. Now, the store generally closed at about 12 o'clock every night. But business was super slow. There wasn't much happening. Now, around 10 o'clock, she decided she's going to lock the doors and they're going to close shop early. Now, there was the difference with this case and some of the other cases is there was another person in the vicinity. Like I said, the janitor did say that around the time she was closing shop, there was a man that was kind of sticking around and didn't really know if he, would go on and buy anything. No one's ever said if there was a transaction or anything made that night. I mean, we are talking back in the early 90s, so I don't know how much of a paper trail there would be if he had made a credit card purchase even going back then. But now this guy stuck around for a little bit, but they believe right around the time she closed shop at 10 o'clock, this man left. Now, 17 minutes later, she set the alarm for the store. She walked out the door. This would be the last time any recollection of Cheryl Kenny being alive would happen. Now, a couple people in the area reported they thought they heard a woman scream sometime a little after 10 o'clock that night. No one saw. There's nothing anyone saw. They say they thought they heard a woman scream, and it was noticed the next morning that her car was still in the parking lot. So possibly if this person may have eavesdropped and heard, my guess is this guy was probably eavesdropping and heard they're closing the store early. This guy probably was the perpetrator of the crime. And he heard right then and there, okay, she's going to be leaving early. And also, too, shortly after they closed the store early was when the janitor left. Um, this don't really understand. I think back then in this era, people had a different mindset and weren't like, I'm going to stick around till she's ready to go. I know. I mean, many places at this point, from so much stuff happening, they're very security driven. You're not going to leave, not just because it's a female, but you're not just going to leave another employee by themselves. When they're closing shop. Now, the last case that did happen in the area, this one was actually. Oh, correction. No, this one actually happened a little bit before. This actually happened in January of 1991. The lady you see right here is Trudy Darby. She was a 42-year-old store clerk at the K&D convenience store in Max Creek, Missouri. Now, at about 10 p.m., she made a phone call to her son, telling him that she saw two suspicious individuals outside of her department store. Yet again, this is another case happening around, the 10 o'clock time frame, dark strip mall, clerk by herself. She tells her son, I see two suspicious individuals outside. And she told him now, as soon as she said this, he hopped in his car, drove there as soon as he could. Now, 10 minutes later, her son got there and she was gone. Her jacket was still there and the cash register was open. Now, 2 days later, blood and a couple of shell casings were found along a gravel road, not too far away from the store where she was working at. Now, unfortunately, not too far away from here, they found her. They found her body along the riverbank. She had been robbed. She was sexually assaulted, and she'd been shot 2 times in the head. So, unfortunately, well, in this case, they did find a body to go along with it. But the difference with this case is a couple of years later, in 1994, Marvin Cheney and Jesse Rush, two half brothers, I believe they got some fingerprints and were able to actually link them. Don't quote me on that, but they were actually able to link them to the Darby murder. Now, all that said, neither man has ever said much as to whether or not they took part in any of these other crimes and any of these other murders. Now, Cheney has been dead since 2017. Rush, however, is still alive and serving a life sentence for the for the robbery and murder of True Darby. However, with all that said, we're still really no closer to. I don't know if you notice yourself here, as you might look into some younger pictures. Cheney's got a beard. Now, as to what he looked like in 1991, I'm not 100% positive. But I find it kind of ironic that you have two guys in the same area who sexually assaulted and were looking for women in this area that they aren't really. I mean, unfortunately, I'm guessing they probably just don't have enough physical evidence to really find anything to prove on either man. So, with all that said, the case of Angela Hammond still to this day, 30 years later, still is unsolved. So, if you saw my case that I did a couple days ago to the Thompson family, I just totally noticed I didn't even get to give them a moment of silence. So, for the Thompson family, if you had a couple videos ago, their family was murdered in the Chicago day. That's been missing and presumably murdered in 1996. But on top of that, for Angela Hammond, for Diane Braungart, for Cheryl Kenny, and Trudy Darby, I would like to offer all these victims a moment of silence. All right. So, once again, down below in the comments, give me some of your thoughts on these cases. Now, I do think that at least with some of the convenience store crimes, they just seem too similar. I wouldn't be surprised if they had anything to do with it. Uh, whereas with Angela's case, it's really, I do believe that she was probably most likely after she was kidnapped, she probably taken somewhere and probably murdered that night. And like I said, his body was just never, unfortunately, been discovered. So, like I said, one more time, just let me know what you think down below. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll have even more stuff coming up for you in another day, so stay tuned, and we'll talk to you soon.